Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And welcome to Afrospace. My name is Nyasha Grace, and I'm joined by my co-host, that's Adetunji Omotola. This is the show where we talk everything African, as we talk on what's happening on the continent in terms of the political space, our economic space, as well as the cultural space. And today we will be focusing on the political space, and we have a very interesting guest who's going to help us tackle some of the issues on the continent politically. Her name is Ayisha Osori. Ayisha has over 18 years experience in the public and private sector, having worked for some of the biggest organizations in the world, which include the World Bank, as well as the UNICEF and National Democratic Institute, as well as the Department for International Development. And her projects have been related to good governance. She's also involved with gender equality, women's economic and political participation, as well as ending violence against women. Ayisha is also a published author, and her latest book, which is titled Love Does Not Win Elections, is one that she accounts her experience and when she contested in the elections of 2014 on the PDP primary ticket. And this book is recently has caused quite a bit of a wave in terms of the acclaim on her accounts. Ayisha, you're a busy woman, and that is a very formidable profile. Thank you so much for coming on to Afrospace, and a big welcome.
Thank you, Nyasha. It's a pleasure to be here with you and Adetunji today.
Thank you so much. Now, Ayisha, thank you for coming. Before I ask you the first question, I just wanted to talk about the organization that you work for currently. So you work for the Open Society Institute of West Africa, and the issues that you guys deal with are anti-corruption, civil society, election and governance, justice, rule of law, media, minority rights, public service delivery, natural resource governance. It also says that you're part of the Open Society Foundation, which is a global body, and it's all around the world. And the Open Society Foundation works to build vibrant and tolerant democracies whose governments are accountable to their citizens. To achieve this mission, the foundation seeks to shape public policies that assure greater fairness in political, legal, and economic systems and safeguard fundamental rights. So I thought I should read that out because it's important what you're doing. So well done there. But going straight to my first question, in looking at your profile, I saw that you have a breadth of areas of professional expertise. You're a lawyer, author, development consultant, politician, or should I say wannabe politician, and journalist. Now, which one of these powerful platforms, or professions rather, is your main profession?
Thank you for the introduction, Nyasha and Adetunji, and thank you also for including the profile for Open Society Initiative West Africa, which I head as the executive director. Yes, we're very proud of the work that we do as a grant-making and advocacy organization, and I'm pleased again to be here with you. To be honest, thinking about your question, I thought my main profession is to get through life. I think everybody just you keep changing as you adapt, as you face different experiences and you change. So I am all of these things. Though to be fair, I wouldn't consider myself a journalist. All I've done is sort of write and share my opinions for a couple of years in an op-ed type of weekly platform. And so I would be doing a disservice to journalists who really face a lot of dangers around the world, as we can see, with many journalists being incarcerated or killed because of their jobs. So kudos to them, but I can't claim to be that. Right now, I would say that my main profession is to work with civil society, do my best to support civil society in the countries that we work in, 10 countries in West Africa, trying to make sure that we fulfill our mandates in terms of trying to ensure that civic spaces stay open, to ensure that governments are accountable and transparent, and that people, citizens, can get the good governance that they desire and that they deserve.
All right. And of course, we did mention this in the profile when we introduced you, that some of your work is in good governance, in gender equality, in women's economic and political participation, in ending violence against women. Can you share with our viewers the work that you're doing, particularly towards good governance in the governance space? What does that look like?
Sure. I will speak largely from the perspective of the work that we do in OSIWA, because we do a lot of work around governance. In fact, our three main pillars, the first is democratic governance, the second is economic advancement, and the third is equality, justice, and human rights. Under these three main pillars, we do a lot of work trying to make sure that, and largely governance is basically making sure that government, whether it's on the federal level or the state level or local government level, and whether it's the executive, the legislature, or even judiciary, that all these different elements of what it means to be government and what it means to be governed all work effectively for the good of the public. And we can see, if we do a rough analysis of many of our countries, not just Nigeria where I come from, but across East, West, and Southern Africa, we'll find that many of our countries, we can't say with confidence that we're being governed properly. So I'll give an example. Under democratic governance, we work on things like, how do we improve the integrity of elections? How do we make sure that people's votes really count the way they should? To ensure that when their votes count, then they'll be able to hold the governments accountable. We also do a lot of civic education. Civic education is tied to trying to make citizens understand that not only do they have rights, e.g. to vote and to good governance, but they also have responsibilities, and so have to also contribute to the work of holding governments accountable. So we help people, we share people's budgets, especially on health and education in small communities, rural communities. We try to get them to organize to say, you know what, if you're a small farmer, if you're a small miner in Guinea or in Senegal, here's the budget that's supposed to be tied to agri, or here's the budget that's supposed to be tied to the mining community. How do you make sure that it gets to you? How do you make sure that you use that? So those are all the different ways. Under equality, justice, and human rights, for example, we try to work with people living with disabilities. We try to work with minorities, such as people living with albinism. Again, what are we trying to do to make sure that these groups are able to engage with governments, to make sure that the right frameworks are in place, the right laws are in place to protect them? We work with the survivors of sexual gender-based violence, domestic violence, all violence against women and girls, again, to make sure that the state is doing what they should, making sure that there's a lot of work going into preventing rape, preventing sexual gender-based violence, preventing sexual harassment, but not only that, to make sure that when it does happen, people are prosecuted, there's a crime that's been committed that needs to be paid for, and we also make sure that there's support for these women and girls and children, and we're hearing increasingly boys as well being molested, and that support includes psychosocial support, having, what's the word I'm looking for, having shelters that these people can go to when their families don't want to support them. So all that, in a way, encompasses what good governance is in many communities and many societies.
Okay. Ayisha, you ran for elections in Nigeria under the PDP, the umbrella, the colorful umbrella of the PDP, a party that was in office at the national level for 16 years. Yeah. Why did you decide to run? And what did you run for? And how did you do in terms of votes? Did people actually vote for you?
Well, to be fair, I never really made it to the finishing line. I stayed an aspirant. So in the technical world of elections, you're either an aspirant, and then if you win your primaries, you become a candidate. So I never made it to be candidate where I needed to campaign to the public for them to vote for me. I stayed as an aspirant. So it was really within the party that I was struggling to get the party ticket. But yes, the role I was trying to bid for was to be a member of the House of Representatives, which is the lower house in Nigeria's National Assembly, made up of 360 legislators. I wanted to represent the people of Amak Buari, which is a constituency in the FCT, the Federal Capital Territory, where Abuja, the capital, is. So that was my experience. And to be honest, why did I run for that role? There's a couple of reasons why. One is that at that time, I was the chief executive officer for the Nigerian Women's Trust Fund, which is a small nonprofit organization that is focused on trying to get more women elected. So I was doing it in a way to learn about the process, because I had spent about 3 years in that role advising women, but it was really advice that came not from the real practical understanding, really more theoretical from the articles you read, from the conversations you have, but the experience was absolutely invaluable. So I decided to run for 3 reasons. The first was to learn, what's it really like? To take all what we hear out of the realm of rumors and stories and to really ground it, which is why I wrote a book about it. The second reason was I really honestly didn't see people like me running. And when I say people like me, it's not like I'm some special alien from Mars, but just, how I see myself, fairly well educated, fairly articulate, knows some of the issues, has some experience, has some passion, really wants to do good, or at least try to contribute to society. So I wanted more people like me, as I said. And so that led to the third reason why I ran, which was to set an example that, people like us, in quotes, who normally you don't find in politics in Nigeria, you don't find in politics in really many societies across Africa, should come out. And I am happy to say that after I wrote my book, lots of young people in Nigeria ran at the next election cycle, in the 2019 election cycle. Many more people attempted to run for primaries. So I think it was a really good experience. And I'm happy that I wrote a book about it, which for me has sort of democratized the information that newbies like me would go through, all the things you don't know about as a person who's coming into politics and doesn't have the political grounding or political family. The book helps you to navigate that system and that process.
Yeah, I mean, how so important, Ayisha, to have that kind of information to other aspirants and young people, like you said, who are educated, who have the skill set, but perhaps are intimidated to even try. Let's talk about your book. Your book, which is titled "Love Does Not Win Elections," has done really well, and you've already alluded to some of that success of the book. Tell us, what does love have to do with elections? And while you're at that as well, explain to us then, what does win the elections?
God, now this is a question that could take hours. This question has layers, but I'll try and keep it short. I mean, there are 2 answers. There's one tongue-in-cheek answer. The tongue-in-cheek answer to love, what does love have to do with elections, is that when I was an aspirant trying to get the ticket for my party, I kept being told by the party members. So basically for the primaries, you'll be dealing with your party members. So I was talking to party members, delegates who would be voting at the primaries. And they assured me that they were for me, they loved me, they would, I must win, in all sorts of different dialects. They were like, they're for me, basically carry go, as we say in Nigeria. You don't win, just go. And of course I didn't win. So that's the tongue-in-cheek. It's not love, it doesn't matter what the candidates say, what the delegates say about you. It doesn't matter what maybe even what the voters feel about you. That's not win elections. So that's the tongue-in-cheek meaning to that. But on the other hand, love does have everything to do with elections, because first of all, for you to want to run for office, I think in a place like Nigeria, where being in politics has a really very bad reputation, especially for women, there's a sense of self-love, is enlightened self-interest that, I love myself enough to want to say, let me contribute to building a better society. And that leads to the second love, my love of my community, the understanding that even though I might live a life of privilege, there are many others who don't have that opportunity, who don't have that privilege, and that my well-being is diminished by having so many people who are not okay. And so it's that love for myself that's translated into love for community, and even larger than that, into love for our country and our continent. And how do we see, our contributions to building the kind of continent we want? I don't want to keep speaking. I know I'm from Nigeria, and this is talking about Nigeria, but you hear a lot of people are migrating. You find Senegalese who are dying in the Atlantic Ocean, trying to get to Europe, trying to get out of the continent. African leaders should be ashamed of themselves, but also African privileged people, elite, the enlightened, should also be ashamed. Why are people so desperate, crossing the Sahara, getting drowned in the Atlantic, doing everything they can to get to Canada, to the US, to the UK, anywhere where they can go away from the continent? We should be trying to build our continent. There should be a sense of pride in the continent, which we don't see. So for me, love has everything to do with elections, because elections are the way that we recruit the leadership that should have the vision to invest in people, to invest in healthcare systems, to invest in education, to invest in security. So that's the link for me. And so it goes back to, for them, so what wins elections in Africa and in Nigeria? it seems what wins elections is having lots of money to compromise the system. Winning elections means, you know, you'll be able to pocket the election management body, you can navigate them, you can make sure that you pad the election management body with all the types of individuals who will do your bidding if you're the executive. Winning elections means being able to manipulate the security forces, who we find in many of our elections, including in Nigeria and the last one in 2019, shamefully, you know, snatching ballot boxes, destroying ballot boxes, literally turning collation centers upside down. So those are the things that win elections. It's not the vote, it's not the ballot. So that's what it takes, unfortunately, right now to win elections. And we're also seeing a very dangerous trend across West Africa that started with Senegal, is being picked up by Benin and Niger, where people, and now Guinea, where the electoral law is being manipulated to include something called sponsorship. So you'll say that a candidate, for example, so even within a party, you'll say that, oh, a party, even though, let me use PDP for an example. So I would be the PDP candidate for president, for example. But if the party, the party in power, which is APC right now, could manipulate the election laws, they would make it in a way that, okay, Ayisha can be the candidate for PDP, but she must also get the sponsorship, meaning the endorsement of, let's just say, 1 million Nigerians. And she must give us this endorsement in writing, and each of these million people must have their voter registration numbers or ID card numbers on it. It's almost an impossible feat. But that rigs the system to make sure that the only people who can come up are basically people who maybe the people in power want. So this is what we're seeing. We're seeing more and more manipulation of elections. We're seeing that our dictators understand that, you know, democracy is now the fad, so to speak, even though we're seeing a lot of regression. And nobody is a fan anymore of, you know, military rules and coups and things like that. But they use the electoral laws to propagate coups in a way, to entrench themselves, to give themselves extra terms in office, or to ensure that they can put the people they want into office. As we saw in an example recently with Ouattara and Cote d'Ivoire, where he endorsed the prime minister, who unfortunately just died. And now everybody's running helter-skelter to see what's going to happen next to the president's party, what's going to happen. So this is how we're seeing a manipulation of elections and a way that to almost rig elections even before the election day.
Very powerful presentation there on that question. Ayisha, you said in one of your many speeches that you've given that in Nigeria specifically, that on an election day, about 80% of the battle has already been lost. Can you tell our viewers what you mean? I mean, the battle hasn't even started, and 80% is already lost on election day, even before votes are counted. Can you explain that to us?
Yes,
Please.
I can, in a very, very vivid way. To be honest, I was one of those people who was never engaged in the civic process or the politics in any way. I voted for the first time when I was 39 years old. But I remember the pride with which, you know, and excitement with which I voted in 2011. But what struck me was that afterwards was that, hang on, I didn't choose, I wasn't part of the process of picking out the candidates who I'm voting for. So it's just the same way. So many average Nigerians are not part of any political parties. We're not part of the two major political parties right now, whether it's the PDP or the APC. So we have no say, for example, on if, let me use the most recent example of elections, of if an Obaseki should emerge from the party primaries, or if an Iyamu running for the Edo State gubernatorial should emerge as the candidate. All we're doing now is coming down on election day to vote between these two, when many of the cases, they're actually the same, as we can see again with these two candidates, where Iyamu used to be the candidate for PDP and Obaseki used to be the candidate for APC, and now they've just switched. So we are excited. You know, we tell our children, once you turn 18, you know, get your voter's card, go out, vote. Your vote is your right. Your vote is your right, yes, but what are you voting for? If by the time you're voting on election day, the real decision has been made to put forward a Buhari or to put forward an Atiku, that we are not part of that choice. And so that's why it makes a mockery of democracy that we're excited to vote on election day when we're not in the political parties, making our own voices count in terms of the type of candidates who are winning the primaries and being electable on the platform of their parties.
All right, very interesting views there, Aisha. Let me take you to a year ago where you presented a TED talk in Maitama, Abuja, Nigeria. And in the talk, you referenced the Greeks who gave three types of people who you said are either an idiot, a tribesman, or a citizen. Could you tell our viewers exactly and explain and expound on these three types of people that a country is made up of?
Sure, I can do that. The idiot is typically a very private person, sort of, self-assured, what's the word? Self-contained, can provide for themselves in every way and any way possible. And I think you'd say that the majority of our elites fall into this group. We probably even admire them. I would say that I was an idiot before I started getting involved in the political process and understanding my role as a citizen. So, but the idiot is typically, I don't care. I'm just here. I'll just make do with my life and move on. Then the tribesman, which is where we also see a lot of people predominantly, are people who see everything through the prism of their ethnicity or maybe their religion or whatever group they are loyal to for whatever reason. So it doesn't always have to be ethnicity or religion. It could just be, this is where my patronage lies. This is where I eat from, or this is just the club that I identify with. And so these people, they lie. They never see things fairly. They're always biased towards their group, their clan, their people. And they're usually scared of others. They're not open to diversity. They're not open to differences. And they typically resort to violence very quickly, which is, again, we can see that in many of our countries, we don't settle our disputes with conversations or dialogue. It quickly degenerates into killings, hackings, and all sorts of things. And then the third one is the citizen, which is where we want most of our people to be. The citizen is responsible, is socially conscious, and understands enlightened self-interest, which I spoke about earlier. The citizen is engaged. The citizen knows that in addition to having rights, the citizen also has responsibilities. And you'll find that citizens engage in the political process. They vote when they're supposed to. They support campaigns. And largely, they're civil in terms of their dialogue and how they engage. So those are the different types of people that make up. And the reason why it was important for me to talk about this in my TED Talk was because I was trying to make sure that people see themselves. And that's why I owned up that I was an idiot as well. And I know that many people actually are sort of hover between being idiots and being tribesmen. And maybe people are even a bit of both. But what we need is more Nigerians, more Africans being citizens who understand that, look, if we want to build a just and fair get into government to make the decisions to prioritize budgets and to prioritize the way resources are spent and deployed.
Okay. Look, Aisha, I have had the opportunity to be on, I think I tell people that I'm probably going to win the award for someone who's been on the most webinars. Because I think I've been on about 150 webinars.
Wow.
But I was actually, I've been on a lot of webinars. A lot of them have to do with Africa's economy, women's participation. The latest one was a WIM-based one. They called something called WIM-POL. In fact, I'm wearing a band that I got from the WIM-POL event that I attended last year. Although the elections were now postponed by a week, so I decided to come back to South Africa. I couldn't waste more time. I spent 35 days in Lagos. So this question that I have, given the fact that we know that in the upper house in Nigeria, the Senate, there's only 7 women senators out of 100. 7. I think there are 109 senators. 109, you have 7 women, and one of them has died. Sadly, Senator Rose Oko, she passed on in London just before COVID started. And the ruling party, I might add, has only 2 women senators, and the PDP had 5, so they have 4. So you have 6 women now, because Rose Oko has now passed. And so I suspect there'll be a by-election, probably a man who win that. But given the dismal percentage of about 4% in Nigeria, firstly, why do you think it's so low, given the fact that it was higher in 2003 and 1999. It seems to be coming down. So why do you think it's so low? And then also, what can be done as a matter of urgency to fix it? Because the optics doesn't look so great. You see men everywhere. It's almost like a football match or something, you know. So tell our viewers.
Sure, and yes, thank you for that question, and it's a very valid one. And I'd like to start with saying that it's funny you mentioned 2007, because yes, that's the highest that we've actually been in terms of women elected into the National Assembly. We had 7.8 at that time. When you took the number 9, at that time we had 9 women elected into the Senate. Again, the highest number of women ever elected into the Senate, and then we now had 27 women in the lower house, which is the house I was trying to go to, bringing it up to a whopping 7.8%. And since then, it's been declining, 7.1% in 2011, 6.5% in 2015, and now 4%, as you point out, in 2019. And the ruling party that's called the Progressive Party actually has fewer numbers than PDP. So ironic. But what is the problem, as you say? Why are we seeing this? Despite increasing interest of women participating, despite all the challenges, we know that more women are running steadily. The numbers are climbing in terms of women who are showing interest. We know that there are more political parties. Nigeria has over 100 political parties. That's a different topic. I don't think that's where we should be going, but let's leave that for now. But what are the problems? Why are we seeing that the numbers are not going up? For me, I think there are 4 main reasons, which for me, first is culture. You know, we're a very patriarchal country. We turn our gaze there when we think about freedoms, but when you look at their culture, it's very patriarchal as well. And they also haven't succeeded to have a lot. It's only over the last maybe 2-3 electoral cycles that you've started seeing more women getting into the Senate, into the House, into the lower house. They had 20% for the longest time. Unfortunately, we've never gone past 10%. So culture is a huge aspect of it. We just don't have a high regard for women. And I'd like to tie that to just the rape cases that we're hearing of, the sexual abuse cases we're hearing of, and the almost complete lack of care and attention that the government is paying to this, despite the fact that women make up 49% of the population. So that's one aspect of culture. The other aspect of culture is women ourselves. You know, many of us don't see ourselves in leadership positions for whatever reason. It could be a mix of the culture of patriarchy that we've been raised in. It could be fear, because obviously we know that we're not wanted in that space. So all these things make it difficult for women. The second one is corruption. You know, the truth is, whether we like it or not, government, the ethos of what government has become in Nigeria is a place to be fantastically wealthy. And so when it's become like, you know, the gold rush, so it's a place for hunters. It's not a place for servers. It's not for people who want to serve. It's a place for people who want to hunt, who want to colonize, who want to extract, who want to exploit. And all those things men will do better. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, enter into government is very fierce, which is why we say government elections is do or die, winning is do or die, right? To paraphrase President Obasanjo at one point in time, which is not what it should be. The third reason is the constitution and our laws and our frameworks. The truth is, our electoral laws need to change, our constitution needs to change. For being in government are too high. And so again, it's time to get free money. Then of course, the worst types of people, the most dangerous type of people who are ready to kill and maim, I want to get a piece of that action. If we should change the incentives for being in government, we'll find that almost overnight, a lot of our politics will be less violent. It won't go away completely, but it would really reduce the incentive to want to be in government. Right now, what we have is that the worst people, even, you know, drug barons, killers. There was a case, I think in 2007, was it 2003, where a senator who used to be a member of the police actually said on the floor of the Senate that he recognizes many criminals. They made him take back that comment, but he was right. He entered the chambers and said, look at criminals here with me as senators. But when he said it, they made him take back that statement, but it was the truth. So politics, because of the way our constitution is drafted, attracts the worst people. And then that's also tied to the fact that we don't have independent candidacy, which is something that many women activists and many, you know, people who want to deepen democracy have been pushing for years. We're saying, give us independent candidacy so that it will free, decent candidates away from the machinations of political parties, which we can see PDP and APC behave almost the same way as MPN, UPN, NPP. All the old parties have the same DNA. They're not designed to be democratic. They're designed to just foist on us certain types of candidates who will maintain the status quo. And then the last one is obviously the elections are rigged. The primaries are rigged, elections are rigged. So it'd be very hard for women in a patriarchal society where being in government is the fastest way to wealth to get women who the party structures are ready to rig for. So when you even analyze many of the women who get into government, and I talked about that in my book, you find that they have strong ties to powerful men. They're either the wives of or the daughters of powerful men, and that's how they can come in to get in. And that then you now ask yourself, when these women get in, what do they do? Do they help to promote good governance, or are they just part of the status quo?
Yeah, I mean, very powerful question there, Ayisha. And I'll ask your opinion and on the recent nomination of the first Ghanaian woman to be put on the presidential ticket of a major political party in Ghana. I'm wondering, from your point of view, do you see this impacting women's participation on the continent, across the continent, with this latest development?
To be honest, really no. It will not make one iota of difference. It's a new thing. It's interesting just for the fact that it's new for Ghana. So we applaud it for Ghana, for the symbolism and for the optics that maybe, young girls in Ghana will grow up and see a woman in that position. But the truth is, we've had Ellen Johnson Sirleaf as president for 2 terms in Liberia. We had Joyce Banda in Malawi. We've had women presidents, not even vice presidents, on the continent, and that didn't change our trajectory. It didn't make any impact on women's political participation. It didn't make any impact in terms of the way women maybe see themselves. It's slow. It's really slow. We've also even had VPs before. Gambia had a female vice president, to one of the most inhumane presidents that we've had in contemporary history, Yahya Jammeh, and she was his vice president for 10 years. In fact, even Adama Barrow, the current president, I think had a female vice president for a couple of years before he changed her. So it's not new, and I think it harks back to the point the question that I asked when you answering the last question, which, what does it mean actually to have women in these positions? Yes, the optics are fine, but do the lives fundamentally change? And what's the subliminal message that's being passed on to younger generations when women get into these roles and behave the same way as men? And so maybe we should be asking not, do we want more men or more women of the same type? Or we should be asking what kind of women. They can perform at optimal, capacity. They can perform in a way that will actually meaningfully change the trajectory of our countries, our communities, and our continent. So for me, it's less now about another woman on a ticket and more about what meaningful change will happen because she's there or because anybody else is there. And to be honest, I don't want to put more of a burden on women candidates than on men candidates. I will ask this question of everybody. So you are now the candidate, so what? Will we now have running water? Will we have better investments in our healthcare? In the middle of a pandemic, are we going to see governments who think nothing of slashing health budgets while keeping their privileges? What will actually change?
Yeah, Ayisha, sorry, Tunji, perhaps we can take one last question. We literally have a few minutes left. If you could just ask Ayisha one last question. Ayisha, if you could just answer it in under a minute, and we'll be able to wrap up the interview.
Yes, so let me just put this to Ayisha. We are in diaspora. So many diasporans are angry. They say $20 billion from Nigeria, $3 billion from, and diasporas cannot vote. Yet when it's bank accounts, BVN, they rush to diaspora and say we should open or sign this BVN forms. What can be done to ensure diaspora voting before 2023?
To be honest, because of all the things I've talked about, and we love our diasporans and we're grateful for the dollars and the euros that they send to us all the time. Thank you very much. May the Almighty replenish. But the truth is, please spend your dollars on trying to change the system. Do not be focusing on trying to take part in a flawed process. You getting a chance to vote is only going to reinforce the illegitimacy of many of our governments. What we need you to do is focus your energy, your anger, your passion on helping civil society to buck the trend, on building a culture of organizing, on building social cohesion. The truth is, if the Igbo, the Yoruba, the Ijaw cannot come together and put aside all these differences, the Muslims and the Christians, if we're constantly bickering and tearing each other to pieces, we will not be able to unify to demand for better governance. So voting, honestly, in diaspora, for me, is really, really not, it should not be the priority. What you should be focusing on is building civil society and building a culture of organizing, especially amongst the youth.
All right, thank you so much, Ayisha, for ingratiating us with your knowledge and insights, and giving us an insight into the political space and what needs to be done for women to thrive, for better leadership, for better governance, and of course to end the terror on women in terms of violence. Tunji.
Yes, so thank you so much, Ayisha, for coming through. I'm sure we'll be interviewing you again in the future. There's a lot that has to happen, especially this year. Next month, there will be 8 countries in Africa that will turn 60, and it's Women's Month in South Africa, and we're hoping to promote African women. I call myself a feminist. I believe in the power of women. My grandmothers were very powerful. They didn't go to school, but they were very smart, and one of them could have been president anyway. So yeah, thank you so much for coming to Afrospace, and I'll say Odabo, Kachifo, Segobe.
Segobe, say Anjima. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Ayisha. It's Salah Kashle, Kwaheri, Sarai Jaganaga from me, Nyasha Grace. Until next time, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.